Today, as President Franklin Roosevelt dubbed it, is the day that will live in infamy. And on the 80th anniversary of the attack that brought America into the Second World War, we are remembering a now abandoned base that played no small part in the war. Brendan, believe it or not, this story comes to us from the small town of Pyote, Texas.
Yeah, to Pyote, Texas, and Monahans as well, to the Rattlesnake Bomber Base, and Monahans where the Rattlesnake Bomber Base Museum is. And that museum is keeping this part of West Texas and American history alive. Along Interstate 20, just west of Pyote, sits a rather unique-looking rest stop, deserted. But it's a story. It's pretty important. It marks Pyote's place in history.
Rattlesnake Bomber Base was the largest bomber training base in the United States during World War II, which is amazing because you drive by now and there's, a little two walls of a hangar left.
The story goes that after Pearl Harbor in 1941, the citizens of Pyote were swept up in the call to war. A Ward County commissioner went to New Mexico to the Army Corps of Engineers and pitched Pyote's 360-day-a-year flying weather and expansive flatness.
And they didn't really give him an answer, but several months later, in the summer of '42, they started to notice a lot of things getting unloaded off the rails in Pyote, a lot of construction materials, started clearing some land out around Pyote, south of Pyote. And so they're like, hey, something's happening.
And something was happening. The Army leased a large chunk of land from the University of Texas and built Pyote Army Air Base, which became affectionately known as Rattlesnake Bomber Base thanks to, well, all the rattlesnakes out there. Initially, the base was used to train airmen on B-17 bombers, the Allies' main bomber in Europe. But war necessitates innovation, and just 2 years later, the B-29 arrived, and this would help the Allies in the Pacific Theater.
They began training crews for the B-29s here. The B-29s went over to the Pacific because they could fly longer, and in fact, they were some of the planes that could hopefully make it to the Japanese mainland.
The B-29s proved successful, and in fact were capable of making it to mainland Japan. The B-29s were the aircraft that eventually dropped the atomic bombs on Japan in 1945, abruptly bringing the war to an end.
When the war came to an end, of course, the government had hundreds of planes on order, and while I guess a few people in the government knew about the atomic bomb, most people didn't, so you're still turning in orders. So there are lots of planes at factories that the government has to pay for. There's nowhere for them to go. So at that point, Pyote became a storage facility.
Many planes found their way to Pyote over the years, but B-29s were by far the most common, some of which were brand new off the assembly line. The best planes were wrapped up tight and weatherized for future use, but the majority of them were cut apart and melted down to be sold to factories back east. Even the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the first atomic bomb on Japan, found her way to Pyote for a few brief years as the West Texas desert helped to preserve the plane.
In February of 1952, the Swoops and the Enola Gay were both flown here to be stored here.
After the storage era ended at Pyote Air Base, the base housed a radar site, helping to keep watch over the West Texas skies during the Cold War. But that too came to a quick end.
Early to mid-60s, about 64, I believe, the base closed again, and it closed for the final time at that point. The land had always been leased from University of Texas lands, and so at that point, the lands were returned back to University of Texas.
At its peak in 1944, it housed more than 6,500 people. That's more than 50 times the current population of Pyote. Interstate 20 was eventually paved through the northern portion of the base, separating the main entrance from the rest of the compound. And though the majority of the base is off limits to the public, that main entrance is now a historic marker. It's surreal to think the one-time largest bomber training base in the United States is now nothing more than a concrete frame and a severed main entrance. Standing at the gate with its 1940s iconographic lettering and painted wings, the roar of traffic along the interstate, it's almost deafening. Yet you get the feeling that something important happened here, some almost 80 years ago. And in that West Texas air, if you listen closely, you can still hear the unmistakable hum of the B-29s that called Pyote home. And if you want to go see the museum for yourself, the museum in Monahans is open Tuesday through Saturday, and I promise you, it is definitely worth the trip.